Good evening. Are you guys excited by this panel? Okay, let's give it a start. So, our subject tonight is cross-border commerce and scaling e-commerce from the world to here. We are in the Middle East. Here we go. Raise your hands if you can relate to the topic in your day-to-day job. I see few hands, not everyone. All right. I believe this topic is very relevant to everybody. And just to give a quick context, in short, it means what it really takes for global brands to enter Middle East. Localize, fast, keep conversion high, and remove friction across tech, operations, payments, and customer experience. And for that, I'd like to welcome on stage my two speakers for the panel tonight. So please, let's welcome on stage my first speaker, Sarah Ahmed, the CTO of the best. And the second speaker is going to be Amina Fatwa, Executive VP at Z Mobility from Alphabet Group. Thank you very much. So let's start with an opening context. The Middle East is often seen as a growth market, a one growth market. But in reality, you all guys know, this is very much fragmented, right? And it's more complex, and people are really unforgiving if the localization goes wrong. So what makes our panel strong here is the different views based on their own experience. For instance, Sarah, she brings the digital native CTO perspective, bringing and scaling technology, logistics, and customer experience for the pet shop. When it deals to Abhinav at Z, he plays a key role in shaping the company's growth from scratch. He's behind pretty much everything. He was telling me, like, I am Z. Z Mobility, right? Company officiating in mobility. And he's going to tell us how he's bringing the best global best practices from, the biggest brand in the mobility segment to our specifics in the region. Are you excited? Shall we start? So let's start with a small warm-up question for our guests. So when brands say we want to enter the Middle East, what do you think they usually underestimate the most? So who can we have more mics, by the way? You have something there. Because it's mine. It's stuck on my hand and I can't remove it.
You can't take it away from that.
Yeah, it's not gonna move. So who wants to start? Maybe ladies first, Sarah. So when brands say we want to enter the Middle East, let's go and conquer the Middle East. What do you think they usually underestimate the most?
Middle East is looked at as like a growth market, and some brands underestimate that even though it's a growing market, that the expectations here are quite global. So customers still have global expectations when it comes to their on-site experience, their post-delivery experience, their payment experience. They're always comparing you to global brands like Amazon, to international luxury brands. Customers are now exposed internationally, and so it's not really a maturing market still in terms of expectations. And a lot of times this is really underestimated by the brands when they enter the market.
Yeah. According to me, one of the things which is often underestimated is it is thought of as a single homogeneous market, whereas it is actually very, very heterogeneous. You look at every single country, it is different in the Middle East. Every city within that country could be very different. In fact, within cities, so for our business, for instance, and because we are a very hyper-local business, within Dubai, we've seen that Dera and a Marina have very, very different behaviors from each other. So it becomes as heterogeneous as that. So that's something which often from the outside, you would think that, okay, this Middle East, but actually is far more fragmented than that.
Yeah, so in short, you're saying that in the Middle East, we are as much demanding as other Western, more developed countries, and they should know that. And secondly, they have to know the difference between Dubai Marina and Dera. Very much.
Absolutely.
I like it. Thank you. So another leading question then is, so what do you think must be localized versus stay global? Who would like to take this question? Agnath?
Yeah. Uh, so look, the way I see it, and this is also reflecting from what we've done in the business, is that there are certain things where there's a experience benchmark which is there, and there's tried and tested things which work and which is similar globally, right? So, and I'm not saying this because you're from checkout, but interestingly, payments, for instance, right? There's a global standard in terms of how payments work, and it's pretty much the standard mechanism that works, and therefore you don't necessarily need to localize. Uh, but then there are experiences which are on the ground, right? So both of our businesses, for instance, have delivery components which require a lot of localization because there are nuances local to the market. So everything which is operationally heavy requires localization. Things which are not necessarily operationally heavy and where there are global benchmarks already set can stay global.
Yeah, Sarah, would you like maybe to give an example in your personal experience and story about this kind of localization you probably had to do for the local market?
Globally, like we said, expectations in terms of experience are quite global. So the customers expect a certain standard, and that remains the same regardless of region. But operationally, this is where there's a difference in terms of your execution. And that comes with delivery expectations. Every market also has some nuances in terms of how aggressive your delivery promise can or shouldn't be. There are markets where people expect deliveries, particularly for us in retail and online commerce. You're competing in certain areas with delivery promises of minutes. And in some locations and geographies are completely fine with a couple of days of delivery, right? So it depends also on the geography. Payment methods as well. So credit card, yes, but you see variances in terms of adoption. So you need to optimize your experience and your journey online, depending on the region towards certain payment methods, whether it's wallets like Apple Pay or typical generic credit cards. Some of the local payment methods like MENA, for example, in Saudi or Kenya and Kuwait. You need to think about these. Delivery providers, messaging, communication, I think very, very important. A lot of people, in terms of off-site communication after the order happens, what language you speak to the customer, all these communications, localizing that is important. I would say localizing the language is as important as it used to be. There's a very broad language awareness of the English language. Just not over localizing with dialects, which is something we've seen some of the platforms over complicate their translation services in, right? So finding that right balance.
So that's interesting. So you told us a lot about what to localize, but what should stay global then?
Customer experiences, as in your on-site purchase journey, there are typical standard experiences that customers expect the same. Obviously, you don't want to build really complex, overcomplicate certain things in their journey throughout, especially for e-commerce and online. It stays pretty much the same, right? There's no need to over engineer that, right? Mostly the localization happens in the operational parts, in payments, in deliveries, in the experience post-purchase. This is where localization is absolutely important. And localization here means picking the right method more than language or aesthetic localization. This is where it's key.
Yeah, very interesting. By the way, to the audience, I see you all boiling with questions, burning questions after what we're talking about. You might have a notebook in front of you. Please take your questions down. We do have this session for about 30 minutes of the panel, or a little bit less. And then we'll have 10 minutes Q&A. So that's why we'll ask you to raise your questions, all right? Then, yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. And actually, it reminds me, first of all, that with the arrival of quick commerce, we definitely got spoiled here. But if I go back to France, where my family is, I mean, yeah, I have to wait a lot, and usually everything stops at 8 p.m. or even 7 p.m. Just forget it if you forget to buy. And Sunday is totally off, so cannot buy any groceries. In Dubai, it's almost 24/7. It's crazy, and that's something that probably global brands would underestimate big time. They might think that here would be ready to wait 1 month and maybe the delivery will come on the back of a camel, but this is not like this, right? That's the opposite, total opposite. We very much advance on that. And I'm very proud of that. So now let's talk about technology actually, because all of this is definitely powered by solid infrastructure, platforms that must be scalable, that must have an uptime. And then on the tech and system perspective, what needs to be in place before a global brand enter in the Middle East? What's your view on that? Who would like to answer? Sarah? Yeah.
What needs to be in place is a cohesive system. And like I said earlier, taking into account the nuances of different geographies and regions means you need to have a system that you can have serve multiple regions efficiently and reliably. I think one of the things that is unforgiving in this region is whatever you promise the customer, you need to deliver. So if you can deliver in minutes, promise minutes. If you can't, then just promise hours, promise days. But whatever you promise the customer, transparency and reliability is important. And because that is your ultimate objective, and that's the customers, that's where they hold you accountable. The system needs to enable you to do that as well, right? Payments, reliable payments, payments that don't fail, delivery providers that don't fail you, delivery routing, choosing the right provider to fulfill your promise. So intelligence-based systems, especially if you're doing cross-country, that allow you to scale operations dynamically based on which country you're working in is important. And monitoring metrics, operational metrics. A lot of the brands, when they come into the region, you're looking into acquisition, you're looking into brand awareness, and you're not really taking a look into the operational excellence part, which sometimes gets overlooked. And from a tech perspective, this is where you really need to make sure that you've got all your goals tightened and that you have proper visibility into am I delivering on time? What's my customer contact rate? What's my customer service availability like? Can people contact me at night? If I'm offering a late delivery, 60-minute delivery or 30-minute delivery, can people reach me? This is really what makes it from a systems perspective that I feel sometimes gets overlooked.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Amina, for you, what's the best strategies between build your own solution versus and buy the ready-made solution off the shelves?
So this is an age-old debate, and I don't think that there's any single answer that anybody has ever agreed upon. I'll tell you the approach that I personally feel. To me, in a business, the core element of your business, it's very important to have a very good control on those, right? And that's where my bias generally is that building those is important. But there are elements where you will not necessarily be able to do the best job at being able to solve for it, right? So, for instance, I'll give you two examples that from a business correctly. So, when it comes to payment gateways or the entire payment experience on the platform, if you need to be a payment gateway yourself, you will require perhaps 2 years to just get the license. And for you to build the experience which is comparable to the best in the world will require another couple of years maybe. So it just doesn't make sense to do that. The other example is that for customer communications, there are enough and more CRM tools which are available, which are best in the industry. So you don't necessarily need to build your own system. What you need to own is what is the kind of communication that needs to happen, right? What customer cohorts, what do I need to say, when do I need to say? And then you can use any tools which are available. So my view is that the core element has to be yours, and then you can have different elements in the system which are bought out and not necessarily built from scratch.
Yeah.
Commodities, basically.
Yeah, please.
Commodities. You buy the commodities, really.
And all right, so you buy the commodities. So which means that sometimes, personally, this is my personal perspective, because I've been working in the tech industry for quite some time, is a company that decides to build becomes in a way a tech company. But if the DNA of the company is more to be I don't know, a fashion company or a ride-hailing company, then it changes the DNA, and sometimes it becomes a challenge. So this is definitely something I believe, that needs to take into account. And you guys keep talking about payments, so guys, keep going. Keep talking payments, I love it. All right, so the next question is going to be about conversions, payments. That's not only when we talk about it, and customer trust. So yeah, the question is, what builds trust fastest with the first-time shoppers? So customer experience, payments, delivery times. Share your experience, your stories, the company we want to hear from. Sarah?
I think we just moved from a model of delivering in 1 to 2 days to 60 minutes in the pet shop, for example. And this was a very good exercise for us to look at the difference between what our customers expecting from us and what are we able to offer them, right? The deal breaker is always your commitment to a promise and your delivery on that promise. So like I said, whatever you promise the customer, being able to deliver on that promise. So doing everything throughout the journey. People think that, you go, you click, you buy, and sometimes the items magically appear at your door, right? But the reality is it goes through warehouse picking, packing processes, people, and these are the areas where you risk really breaking your trust of the customer, where you really need to be on top of operations at a very, very scrutinized level. Obviously, the systems and stability and reliability of the system, but that's not taken for granted. There are very few cases where you go to a website and you say it's buggy or it's not working. That's taken for granted now. The competition now, in reality, where customers really trust a brand or not, is it's reliable. I know that if I order, I will get my order on time and I will get the items that I ordered. I will not have out of stocks. My payments will go through. There will not be, I was charged and did not deliver my orders. All of these exceptions really cause frustration and cause the customer not to come back. And it's you converting the customer for the first time is great, but then you keeping them with that post-purchase experience to come back again and again. This is where really the brand's retention happens. And it's not because they love the brand, it's because you have been a reliable brand.
Yeah, there's a saying that is, we never get a second chance to give a first good impression. And that's definitely, if you promise a delivery in 60 minutes and it comes after 3 days, be sure the customer is not going to buy again. Abhinav, what do you think then customers in the Middle East are less forgiving about? Abhinav.
So
No, just waving at Paul, just for the time check. Because awesome.
So the analogy that I often use is that, look, while Middle East is an attractive market that people perceive, it actually is also not a massive market. So from population perspective, it's not something which is massive. There are enough and more companies already present. So if I were to draw a human relationship example, everybody has already dated somebody. So if you are now going out to date somebody, there are already benchmarks which are there. And therefore you need to prove yourself for that person, right? So from the business analogy perspective, customers have a bare minimum threshold of the hygiene experience which is there across all elements, right? Whether it be delivery, whether it be payments, whether it be customer experience. And they're unforgiving if you're not doing that. But that does not mean that you will never go. Because look, let's be practical, right? There are times where things will not really happen based on what you've delivered, what you've promised, right? What is very important is that is there human systems in place to be able to acknowledge that yes, we goofed up. We did not deliver on what we said, and therefore here's an apology, here's what we're doing, etc. To build that trust that okay, things will not go wrong, but if they go wrong, there's somebody who knows that things are going wrong and will do something about it.
So what it made me think about brands that enter this market. There's a lot of global brands that are big in their regions and they're coming in. I'm thinking about Kita right now because recently I ordered on Kita and my experience was definitely different because they knew but in effect Kita is getting market shares. So do you think that all these little mistakes and glitches and breaking promises are really things that make people unforgiving if you give them freebies? If you use this type of tactics. Timo also has been really good at doing that, for instance, with the games where you're winning things. PlayStation 5 for my son, which I don't want to buy, but at the end it's free. What do you think?
See, offer can make you try, will not necessarily make you stay. So that's the key differentiator that can get you into the door. But if you have to stay, then you need to provide that consistent experience, which is reliable. So offers can only take you so far.
Yeah.
Will you order from Kita if you're super late, you need to go in like 1 hour, and they say, let's say, regardless of pizza, but a brand that has broken that promise and is giving you discounts, and you need the order now, will you order that, or will you open the app and you trust that it will deliver on time and do that right at the time of this decision making, right? When you need this convenience, and it's not a luxury, you will always go to the brand that is reliable.
Makes sense. Thank you. And then we'll continue with, actually, we're touching the ends. I guess the last part is going to be about talent, culture, and decision making, and then we'll wrap up. So are you still with us? Yeah, you like it? Lots of lessons learned, lots of good takeaways. And so the last question about talent, culture, and decision making, which is a very important one and also very much underrated. How critical do you think local talents are to scaling a successful business for global brands from global HQ in the Middle East? I would say, Abhinav, maybe you want to start?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I generally like analogies, as you might have figured. So the analogy that I often use for this is that if you want somebody to be responsible for driving a car, you need to give them the control of the steering. So you can't have local teams not having control but being responsible for the business. So if you're responsible for driving the car, the steering, the throttle, the brake have to be accessible.
So the question is, where is the control and how are you able to put the cursor to define what is HQ related, what is local tailored, and how probably global can manage the local, How do you put the cursor?
So you need to have a local team which is responsible for running the business. Now, depending on the kind of business that you have, will define what is the kind of strength that you require for that team. But they're the closest to the ground, right? So it is important to empower them to be able to drive and do what is required to scale the business and have the trust in them doing that.
Yeah, and Sarah, do you think it's important to have people who are culturally aware? Yeah, how does it impact the business?
Moderator, for example, is a brand that we have started here quite some time ago. And when we started operations in Saudi, it was run by the team here. And that was like a bottleneck in terms of decision making, understanding of the brand, certain quick decisions that you need to make. And things only started to really grow significantly when we had key team members in Saudi who had full ownership, full responsibility, full control. And HQ mainly has visibility, has guidance, has strategy, right? But execution, operations, permission to take action moves much faster when you have local people on the ground. Local people, even that speak the native language, that understand the jokes that people speak. It's important for the branding, the marketing part, the dialect part, and the operation. Either on the ground, they know the nuances of the place.
Yeah, very interesting. So there's a trade-off between speed and control, and between having the capabilities to speak the local language, but also the capabilities to take decisions and understanding the global branding guidelines. Yeah, thank you very much. So now we're touching the end of the panel, and I'm going to ask the panelists some key takeaways to share with the audience and honest lessons learned. So who would like to start? Just keeping it open to you guys. Something you've learned from the Middle East, a lesson that can be shared to a global brand. If they ask you, what should we be aware of if we want to open our business in the Middle East?
Let's go back to the point Abhinav started with, which is there's no playbook really per country, that if you apply it in Europe, it will come and you will apply it successfully here, or if it applies in India, you will come and successfully apply it here. There are differences per market, per city even. And that's something that brand needs to do enough research about before entering, especially on the customer expectations, because the expectations are very, very different. It's just the nature of any market, specific to that market.
Thank you very much. What about you, Abhinav?
I spoke about multiple things. The part that I think I've not spoken about is that unlike many other parts of the world where regulations in general like work, in this part of the world, the regulations, especially in some sectors, can be very, very high. So if you come in that you'll be able to do anything in an unregulated manner, that's not necessarily the case. Regulatory guidelines are very, very high. So for instance, in our business, There's a regulator which governs multiple aspects of the business, including implications on data. Almost all countries have very strict data localization norms, right? So that's something which often companies don't consider. And we were talking about this before the session that often that is something which is overlooked by people when they are entering the market. So that would be the thing that is important to understand.
So in short, I think what's important is to understand to the market, to research, and to learn for the industry specific, right? I think that's the best lesson. And I appreciate, thank you very much. Round of applause for our panelists. So great results.